Hey everyone, welcome to What Just Happened. We welcome Eric Best, CEO and founder of SoundCommerce.
What we're doing at SoundCommerce is we're providing a data platform that makes it easy for retail brands to aggregate data and measure what matters. And this has culminated very recently in the launch of a commercial software product that we call Reactor. And it's designed to onboard retail data to modern cloud data warehouses for the purposes of generative AI exploration of the data, as well as traditional BI analytics and also digital marketing activation. I ran a consumer apparel brand in Southern California called Richer Poorer, which is now owned by Francesca's. And that was a real wake-up call. And for me, experiencing firsthand the complexity that goes along with all of direct-to-consumer retailing was a major educational moment. There are these moments in your career where you get the equivalent of an MBA in a few years. We had marketing technology at Richer Poorer. We could measure site traffic and we could measure conversion rate in our shopping cart, and we knew who was visiting and which ad campaigns they were coming from. As soon as we converted the shopper in the cart and our attention turned toward how to serve that shopper better, then the data went away. And I started to ask very simple questions of the business, like, hey, did we turn a profit on this order? And so it was that problem that basically set us out on this course to found SoundCommerce and try to solve the industry problem with a commercial product. By the time you account for the cost of goods sold, by the time you account for that 15% acquisition discount promotion, the digital marketing on the front end to acquire that shopper in the first place, and then all of the variable costs to fulfill and ship the order to the doorstep. In our case, we started with a 3PL warehouse. And so we were paying variable storage fees for every unit of inventory every month, and those were accumulating. And we were paying variable pick, pack, and ship fees. And then, of course, we were paying UPS and FedEx to get the product to the doorstep. And it turns out measuring that profitability is an exceptionally hard problem, because the data that is required to answer that question or perform that calculation sits all over the place, right? Your digital marketing spend is over here. Your parcel post carrier costs are over there. Sometimes brands can bring that together in a system like NetSuite and ERP and get to the basics. If you start talking about this concept of customer lifetime value, then the calculations become more complex, because now you have to track the identity of the shopper over time, understand what they bought first and what they bought next, and whether each of those transactions collectively adds up to a positive relationship with your customer.
Love this. I love this. Nobody's actually ever talked about buy order profitability. I think because they probably don't want the answer. When you're looking at this data, this is not a question, this is my opinion, actually. Here's my opinion on when you're looking at order profitability. I don't think it lines up with customer lifetime value. I think it actually is a report card on the performance of the business. Not whether the customer chooses to come back, but it's more like when you start to see this pattern of repeatability, it's because you did the customer right. And the customer lifetime value narrative and coming at it from that point of view, I think is, and this is controversial, but I think that everyone's looking in the wrong place. No one's looking within to say, they didn't have a lifetime value. They are not sticky. Why not? Why are they not sticky? What happened along the way? And there's probably nothing wrong with saying certain customers are not a good fit, whether it's your pricing structure, or I know some people get kicked off the ride because maybe it's not the right price. They won't buy from you without a discount. And that's okay. That's okay. That becomes a segment, right? That becomes your sale marketing, right? Or it's maybe there's a return problem, so I do believe on understanding the orders holistically, the way that you discuss gives the retailer so much more information.
I'll give you some really interesting real world examples of exactly the point you're making. Returns is a great example of something that is often hidden from the e-commerce platform, say Shopify or Salesforce Commerce Cloud, because those returns are being processed elsewhere. They might be processed in the ERP system, or you might have a dedicated platform like Happy Returns or Returnly to process those things. And so you have order transactions over here and you have returns over there, and tying out, call it bad customer behavior, someone who buys everything at a discount, takes advantage of a free shipping offer, and then returns everything because of whatever reason, root cause reason, size, fit, fashion. That's a very classic example of something that is typically hard to measure within the business. Something as simple as saying, and you brought this up already, that and we saw this at Rich or Poor as the cost of digital marketing on Facebook was skyrocketing over time. We had, leading up to the kind of COVID era where e-commerce exploded, there was already this arms race happening in terms of paid media spend. And so we were competing with all the other brands in kind of our SoCal lifestyle category, right? The elevated basics fashion category. And we just saw our costs increasing and increasing over time. And at some point, there's this moment of realization that you cannot spend an infinite amount on customer acquisition and expect to ever make that up in terms of an operating profit as a business. And maybe greatly oversimplified, our thesis when we started out is that every decision that you make as a brand operator, whether it's in marketing or merchandising or operations, simply comes down to this trade-off between, can I afford to serve the shopper better? And how far can I invest in that shopper experience that you described before profitable growth is no longer possible? And so you could just think of it as the dial or the meter, where you're constantly trying to strike this balance between amazing shopper experiences and a viable business model at the end of the day. We are very specialized in terms of the connectors that we've built and the data models that we provide that are specific to the retail industry. But as far as the software product goes, it is not constrained in any way to the retail vertical. So over time, we would expect that Reactor will serve other industries. A setup in the market for brands to need to make a philosophical build versus buy decision. And it's oversimplified because a lot of these things are playing more nicely together than they have in the past. So like in really simple terms, you could buy a standalone CDP, or you can buy a data warehouse like Snowflake and use it as your CDP. And we feel fortunate that we adopted this philosophy of composability, ensuring that Reactor is integrated with and plays nicely with these cloud services, so that we're not trying to swim against the current, operate against the headwinds of the rise of this modern cloud era, if you will. So it's been very interesting. So Reactor is a self-service product that really is designed to operate within this ecosystem of cloud services, as opposed to being a standalone software product that you buy and run independent of everything else that's happening.
My question to you, your challenge is, how do you make it important to retailers?
Yeah.
How do you find retailers that really understand the importance of it? It's just another thing. But if you don't do it, the downside is quite large, actually. Let's actually chat about that. Let's get into the burden of education. If you're finding teams are now, because they're taking this composable, flexible approach, they're being restaffed with the right people. If they're not going to build actually inside, they have this flexible mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Are you finding the retail market to be responsive?
Ultimately, the only way that we sell software is when it is driving some material business outcome, some improvement, optimization, business benefit for our customer. And it's very interesting to observe these very large, very sophisticated cloud providers walk into a retail brand and talk about infrastructure modernization or the feature list of a data warehouse. And I think back to something that we've already talked about today, the fact that I was in seat running a brand as a brand operator allows me to appreciate firsthand the importance of a profitable order transaction, or an on-time delivery to the doorstep, or reasonable return on ad spend when I have to justify the next $10,000 or $100,000 of digital media spend toward a particular channel or campaign. All of those things are the context for the outcomes that we're trying to drive. Composability is a how, not necessarily the why. And so we really focus on trying to solve the why before we worry about educating the customer on how we do things differently.
What you've talked about is a bottoms up approach. You have a retailer sitting at their desk, which you sat at, and I need to make some decisions here. I'm going to make database decisions. Where are we at with this and this? And the cloud features and coming into the room is top down, and it's very high to the very top to actually what the day down here, my finger, what the day-to-day retailer executive is faced with and planning for and operating in that. Honestly, the operation window is like a 6 month, maybe a year, but very short time frame decisions, because you're usually changing it along the way anyway. There's a bit of a disconnect there between the big cloud and the retail. And I would say you're much closer to providing that tactical information that really bottom up helps a retailer make those decisions.
I attended a retail CEO summit about a month ago in Europe, and I watched it was about a 7-minute demo. In the 7 minutes that he was on stage, he uploaded to ChatGPT for Omni a spreadsheet that had 4 million retail transactions embedded in the spreadsheet. And then he wrote a 1-paragraph prompt, and it basically went like this. These 4 million transactions represent every order that my business has processed in the last 8 quarters, 2 years of financial history. Please create a public filing, 8K, that calculates the top 20 business performance metrics for a retail brand like mine. I'm not going to tell you what those metrics are. You're going to tell me, ChatGPT. I want you to calculate the metrics, and I want you to show me your work by writing the Python code that calculates those values from the 4 million transactions in the spreadsheet. I want you to graph the last 8 quarters. Then I want you to forecast the next quarter and the next year. I want you to visualize those in the form of a bar chart, both the actuals and the estimated forecast. Then I want a written narrative of the performance of that metric over the last 8 quarters of history and your rationale for the forecast that you are providing. And I want you to take those 20 graphs with the 20 narratives and package them up into a PDF document that is ready for distribution that is less than 20 pages long. And then he hit go. And while he was describing the underlying mechanics of vectors and training data and all of this stuff, we watched in the audience as ChatGPT switched from the textual work to writing the software code to do the calculations, to generating the graphs, to ultimately creating this PDF attachment that dropped into the bottom of the result set. And he opened up the file. And the punchline from this conversation was that he had the actual financial reports for this company. It was a European fashion brand. And I think the variance on everything that ChatGPT did in that 7 minutes was like, it was 4% off or something from what the finance team at that brand had created brute force manually over the course of each of those prior 8 quarters. And so it was shocking. It was one of those, you can't make this up. You can't fake this. Clearly, one of the cool things that Reactor does is it generates this metadata. We actually provide a long form description that says gross profit starts with gross revenue, and we back out discounts, and then we subtract promotions and cancellations and returns. And once we back out cost of goods sold, we arrive at gross profit. Then you have to account for the digital marketing on the front end and the variable shipping cost on the back end. And that description of gross profit gets sent along to the data warehouse, so that explanation is available to the generative AI algorithm when it comes time to interpret what gross profit means. And the interesting thing is your brand and mine may have a different definition. We may interpret GAAP accounting rules differently, or you may have a subscription business and I have a service component to my business where my pet salons operate or whatever it is. And so there's all of that variability from one business model and one brand to the next. And so you can't really rely on the large language model to know what truth is. You have to tell it. And that's a big part of the value proposition for Reactor is we're going to append all of these explanations to the data as we're building the data set so that it's ready to go.
I think that you're very unique in the market, very necessary. I want to congratulate you on your launch.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.